"What's your name?" Caleb asked quietly. She swallowed hard, then whispered, "Sarah." "Sarah, May Hutchkins." The name carried weight, even he recognized. The town whispered plenty. Some called her a thief. Some said worse. But the wild taught Caleb something the town had forgotten.
Out on the far edge of Hollow Ridge, where the wind carries old secrets, and the mountains swallow most men whole, one quiet winter evening changed everything. Caleb Thorne, a weather-beaten mountain man who had spent decades surviving storms, solitude, and the ghosts of his past, expected nothing more than cold silence when he returned to his abandoned family homestead. Instead, he found a pair of frightened eyes staring back at him from the darkness of the corner. A young woman, filthy, exhausted, and clutching a rusted pistol like it was her last lifeline. She didn't belong there. She didn't trust him. And yet, something in her trembling voice, something in the way she braced herself against the world, told Caleb she had already suffered more than most folks could bear. What he did next, and what unfolded after that moment, would shake the quiet valley and eventually become one of the most whispered stories ever told across the West. Right here on Mr. West Legends. Before we ride deeper into this story, take a moment to support the channel. If you enjoy powerful Wild West tales, stories of courage, grit, and unexpected humanity, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves Western legends as much as you do. It helps us keep bringing more stories your way. Winter travels differently in the high country. It doesn't rush in, it creeps, settling itself inside the bones of the mountains long before snow ever touches the ground. And as the late autumn wind swept down from the ridgelines, carrying the smell of pine and distant storms, Caleb Thorne guided his old packhorse through the narrow pass with the slow patience of a man who had spent more years surviving than speaking. For 30 winters, he'd lived alone out in the rough. A man didn't come back from that unchanged. His beard was streaked with silver, his skin leathered by sun and frost, and his eyes, once warm, had learned to track danger the same way others read a newspaper. But beneath the hardened shell was something gentler, a promise he'd made long ago to a woman who had held him together through childhood storms. "Find your way back to goodness, Caleb," his mother had whispered on her dying breath. "Don't let the world turn you stone." That was the promise bringing him home now. Hollow Ridge lay quiet below him, a long valley carved by wind and old memories. And at its center stood the Thorne homestead, if you could still call it that. From a distance, the place looked like a skeleton of its former self. Weather-gray logs, a roof sagging under years of harsh seasons, and a chimney that leaned just enough to make a man worry. Still, the sight tugged something deep in Caleb's chest. You don't forget the place where you learned your first prayers, or fought your first demons. He stopped at the edge of the meadow, letting the cold wind roll past. Mist clung to the grass like the valley's own breath. For a long minute, he just sat there in the saddle, staring at the house that had carried his mother's laughter, his father's anger, and every memory that shaped him into the solitary man he'd become. "It's time," he whispered to himself. The horse snorted, as if agreeing. Caleb dismounted and walked toward the house, boots breaking the frost underfoot. Every step sounded louder than it should have in the quiet. He expected silence, that heavy, lonely kind of silence that settles over abandoned places. Instead, he felt something strange. A tension, a stillness that was not empty, but watchful. He pushed open the old weather door, and it groaned like it remembered him. Dust drifted through the thin beam of light behind him. But just as his eyes adjusted to the dim interior, his heart kicked against his ribs. Someone was in the house. A figure huddled in the far corner, small and trembling, wrapped in rags that barely passed as clothing. Long, tangled brown hair obscured half her face. But the thing that froze Caleb wasn't her posture. It was the pistol shaking in her hands, pointed directly at him. "Don't," she rasped. "Don't come any closer." Her voice cracked like someone who hadn't spoken to another soul in weeks. Maybe longer. Caleb didn't move, didn't blink. A mountain man learns to measure silence before he measures steps. Slowly, with both palms open and visible, he lowered his pack to the floor. "This was my family's home," he said softly. "Didn't expect anyone to be here. Least of all someone scared enough to hold a gun with hands that cold." The woman flinched, like his voice was a threat. Or maybe the kindness in it confused her more than danger would have. "I'll shoot," she warned, though the barrel trembled so badly it barely stayed aimed in his direction. "Maybe you will," Caleb replied gently. "But it looks to me like you're freezing hungry and one bad second away from collapsing." He slowly eased himself down to sit on the dusty floor, crossing his legs like he had all the time in the world. "If you wanted to kill me, you would have done it when I opened the door." That truth seemed to hit her harder than anything else. Her eyes, sharp, blue, and exhausted, studied him like she'd forgotten how to judge a person's intentions.
Rumors were a poor measure of a person's soul. She took a shaky breath. "I know what folks say about me. I'm not looking for trouble. I just needed a place out of the cold." Caleb nodded once. "You picked a place with a long memory. My ma used to say this house looks after the lost better than most people do." Sarah May's eyes softened, but only slightly. You don't mind me being here?" "Mine." Caleb shrugged. "House was built for shelter. You need some." Seems simple enough. For the first time, the pistol dipped, but her shoulders still quivered with fear, exhaustion, and the instinct to flee if she needed to. Caleb could see she was running from something worse than winter, something that had carved lines of worry into a face far too young for such burdens. The wind howled through a crack in the wall. Caleb felt the temperature dropping fast. He slowly reached for a few old logs left by the hearth. "I'm going to build a fire. You stay where you are if you need to. Just don't shoot me for trying to keep us from freezing." He moved with the unhurried patience of a man who didn't want to spook a frightened creature. Sparks caught, flames licked upward, and warmth began to push back the chill. Sarah May's eyes followed every movement, suspicion warring with desperate need. "You been out here long?" Caleb finally asked, keeping his tone light, conversational. 3 months, she murmured. "Sleeping in barns. Under porches. Just running." "From who?" He didn't ask. Not yet. People revealed their truth when trust arrived, not when demanded. As the fire grew, Sarah May inched a little closer without realizing it. Not toward him, no, not yet, but toward the warmth. Toward something that resembled safety. The shadows danced on the broken walls, and Caleb felt something shift inside the room. Not trust, but the first faint echo of it. And then, faintly, barely a whisper beneath the crackling fire, he heard the quietest tremor in her voice. "Are you really not going to turn me in?" He met her gaze, steady and calm. "I'm not here to judge who you used to be," he said. "Only who you choose to be now." For the first time, Sarah May lowered the pistol completely. Her hands fell in her lap, trembling from more than cold. In that abandoned homestead, forgotten by the town, swallowed by snow, marked by time, 2 wounded lives took their first fragile step toward a story neither one could have imagined. The fire crackled brighter as the storm settled over Hollow Ridge, pushing cold fingers through every crack in the old homestead walls. Outside, the wind moaned against the logs like something alive. Inside, 2 strangers sat in a fragile peace, one guarded, one patient, both carrying more pain than they were willing to admit. Sarah May sat close enough to the fire that the warmth touched her face, yet she kept her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if holding every broken piece together. Her hair hung unevenly around her shoulders, matted and wind-tangled. Dirt streaked her cheeks. The faint bruise along her jaw told its own story. Caleb noticed all of it. A man who survived the mountains didn't miss details, but he spoke nothing of what he saw, giving her the dignity she'd likely been denied for months. "Storm's rolling in hard," Caleb murmured. "Roof won't hold long, but the walls should keep most of the cold out." Sarah May nodded, saying nothing. She sat stiffly, as if waiting for kindness to turn on her, like it always had before. Caleb set a tin pot over the flames, and began warming a simple stew he'd carried with him. Beans, dried meat, a pinch of salt. Nothing fancy, but hot food could do more for the soul than most words. "You hungry?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. Hunger, to her, was no stranger. But accepting something, anything, felt dangerous. She watched him with narrowed eyes, then exhaled. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning," she whispered. Caleb offered her the first bowl. She flinched, not from fear, but from disbelief. "You're letting me eat first?" "Storm or no storm," Caleb said, "a man doesn't take food from someone who needs it more." Her throat tightened. She didn't thank him, didn't know how, but she took the bowl with trembling fingers and ate slowly, savoring the heat. Each bite softened the tension in her shoulders bit by bit. Caleb ate quietly, giving her space. A mountain man understood silence better than most folks. He knew when to let the fire do the talking. Only after they finished did he speak again. "You said you were running," he said gently. "If you want to tell me from who, I'm listening. If not, that's your right too." Sarah stared into the fire. Flames reflected in her blue eyes, turned them glassy with memories she tried to bury. His patience, so calm, so steady, finally coaxed the truth out. "It was a man named Marcus Cain," she whispered. Caleb didn't react, but he knew the name. The kind of man whose handshake carried more danger than his gun. A brute with money, influence, and a temper that left marks. "He hurt you?" Caleb asked softly. Sarah May nodded, only when breathing didn't bother him enough. Her voice cracked, not dramatic, not exaggerated. Just a quiet confession of someone who had stopped expecting mercy. "I tried leaving once," she said, eyes fixed on the fire. "Tried slipping out when he was drunk. Didn't make it 10 yards before he caught me." She touched the bruise on her jaw unconsciously. "He said if I ever ran again, he'd drag me through town by my hair. Make everyone see what happens to women who think they're better than him." Caleb's jaw tightened. The firelight cast sharp shadows across his face, revealing an anger he rarely allowed to surface. Not the hot anger of youth, but the cold, righteous kind that lived deep in a man's bones. "How'd you get away?" Sarah hesitated, then whispered, "He hit me. Hard. Hard enough I thought my neck might snap." A long silence. I grabbed his pistol, shot him in the leg. Not to kill him, just enough to run. Caleb nodded slowly. "Seems to me you showed restraint more than most folks in your situation." She huffed a trembling laugh. "Town didn't see it that way. Marcus told them I tried murdering him, and they believed him. They always believe men like him." Caleb listened quietly, letting the truth settle between them. Every word confirmed what he already sensed. She wasn't criminal. She was someone who'd fought her way out of nightmare, alone. "You been hiding ever since?" he asked. "Barns, sheds, wagons, under porches when rain got too heavy." She looked down at her hands. "I know I look like trouble, but I just wanted to live without being someone's property." Caleb was silent again, not because he didn't know what to say, but because some truths didn't need answers. They just needed witnesses. "You're not property," he said finally, "and you're not trouble." He paused. "You're someone who survived." That simple acknowledgement, so plain, so honest, hit her harder than any grand speech could have. She blinked rapidly, brushing moisture from the corner of her eye. Not a sob, not a breakdown, just a human reaction to finally being seen. "You don't know me," she whispered. "No," Caleb agreed, "but I know fear. I know running. I know what it means to be pushed so far you forget what peace feels like." He tapped the wooden cross beneath his shirt. "My ma used to say, people break in different ways," he murmured. "But breaking doesn't mean you're beyond fixing." Sarah stared at him, uncertain. Hope was a foreign thing, dangerous to hold. "How long you planning to stay?" she asked. Caleb shrugged. "Long as this storm lasts. Maybe longer. Haven't decided. Will you leave me here when you go?" "Only if you want me to." Sarah didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her eyes said enough. For the first time in months, she didn't want to be alone. Wind rattled the windows, and the roof creaked under the pressure of the storm. Caleb tossed another log onto the fire, and the flames rose brighter, painting the walls in warm, amber light. They spent the next hours talking in pieces. Not the easy kind of talk strangers make. more like stitching wounds with words. She asked him about his years in the mountains. He asked her where she planned to go if she ever stopped running. Neither had a real answer, but the silence between their sentences grew softer, less sharp. By the time midnight settled over Hollow Ridge, Sarah May had edged closer to the fire and closer to Caleb without realizing it. Trust wasn't built in speeches. It was built in bread shared, fears spoken, warmth exchanged. And in that old homestead, for the first time since she fled Marcus Cain's shadow, she felt a small, fragile seed of safety take root. Neither of them knew what the storm outside was hiding. Neither knew the danger already tracking her scent through the valley. But for now, for this one long night, two broken souls found refuge in each other's company. Tomorrow, the peace would shatter. But tonight, the fire was enough. The storm moved off by dawn, leaving Hollow Ridge wrapped in a bitter stillness. Snow clung to the pine branches like white armor, and the cold bit sharper than the night before. Caleb stepped outside to fetch more wood, his breath fogging the air as he scanned the distant tree line. Something felt wrong, not the quiet itself. Mountains had their own kind of hush, but the heaviness underneath it, like the land was holding its breath. Caleb knew that feeling. Predators moved under that kind of silence. When he returned inside, Sarah May sat near the fire, warming her hands. She looked calmer than last night. Those shadows still clung beneath her eyes. "You slept," he noted. First time in days, she admitted. Almost forgot how. Caleb nodded and set the wood beside the fireplace, but his mind wasn't on kindling. "Storm's past," he said. "Tracks will show clear come midday. If someone's following you, we'll know soon enough." The words made her stiffen. "You think they're still looking for me?" "I think Marcus Cain's a man who hates losing anything he thinks belongs to him," Caleb said. "That makes him dangerous, desperate, predictable." Sarah swallowed. Fear flickered behind her eyes, but also determination. "If he finds me, I won't run this time." Caleb studied her, impressed despite himself. She wasn't built of fragile things. She was cut from the same raw material as the mountains, scarred, weathered, unbroken. But bravery didn't change the facts. Cain wouldn't come alone. By midday, the sky darkened again with gray clouds rolling in from the west. Caleb stepped outside to check the fence line and froze halfway across the clearing. Horse tracks, fresh, coming straight toward the homestead. He followed them with his eyes to the tree line, and his chest tightened. 5 silhouettes on horseback waited just out of range. Motionless, watching. Riders. Exactly the number he feared. His hand drifted toward the rifle slung over his shoulder. Slowly, deliberately, the lead rider urged his horse forward. Even from a distance, Caleb recognized the man riding tall in the saddle. Thick coat, wide hat, a gait that carried more arrogance than grace. Marcus Cain. Caleb felt the temperature drop. Not from weather, but from the realization that the fragile peace inside the homestead was over. He walked back inside. Sarah saw his face before he said a word. Her blood drained to white. "They found me," she whispered. Caleb nodded once. 5 riders. They're waiting in the trees. Her hand went instinctively to the old pistol beside her. She trembled, but not with fear, with fury. "I'm not going back." "Good," Caleb said calmly. "Because I'm not letting them take you." Sarah stared at him, stunned. "You don't owe me anything." "No," he agreed. "But I'm not about to watch a woman be dragged off by a coward who thinks cruelty makes him a man." She blinked, tears forming, but she blinked them away quickly. "What do we do?" she asked. Caleb grabbed the rifle, checked the chamber, and moved toward the front window. "First thing we do is make them bleed for every step they try to take." Sarah took her position at the opposite window, hand steady now. Fear had transformed into something sharper. Outside, Cain's voice boomed across the clearing. "Sarah May, come on out now. Bring the mountain man if you want, but only one of you is walking away." Caleb leaned out just enough to be heard. "If you want her," he called back, "you're going to have to step through a whole lot of bullets to get her." A moment of heavy silence. Then Cain laughed, a deep, ugly sound that echoed off the valley walls. "So be it." Caleb moved first, firing the opening shot. The crack split the cold air like a lightning strike. One of Cain's men toppled backward off his horse, hitting the snow with a heavy thud. The clearing erupted. Bullets tore into the homestead walls, splintering wood. Sarah ducked and returned fire, her shot grazing another rider's shoulder. Horses bucked and screamed. Snow blasted upward with every missed shot. "Stay low," Caleb instructed, firing again with calm precision. "They'll try circling." He shifted positions, using the house's corners for cover. Sarah mirrored him from the opposite side, moving with surprising instinct. Fear had sharpened her, not broken her. A bullet punched through the wall beside her head, showering her with splinters. She didn't flinch. She fired back, hitting one of Cain's riflemen in the leg. The man screamed and fell behind a boulder. "Good shot," Caleb called. "I'm not dying here," she said, breath ragged but steady. "Then keep shooting." Cain's men dismounted now, spreading out. More dangerous. More angles. Caleb took down another who tried sneaking along the backside of the house. 3 down, 2 left. Marcus Cain and his son, Tommy. "Last chance," Cain shouted. "Hand her over, and I promise you a quick end." Caleb fired another shot in his direction. "Not interested," he replied. Sarah's voice rose from the other window. "Why don't you come get me, Marcus? You always were a coward hiding behind other men." Cain roared with rage. Tommy, reckless, hot-headed, charged first. Caleb fired, grazing the boy's shoulder. Tommy shrieked, dropped his pistol, and collapsed behind a log. Cain cursed and fired blindly toward the homestead. Caleb ducked, rolled behind the table, and reloaded. "You good?" he called to Sarah. "I'm fine," she said. "You?" "I've been through worse storms." Their eyes met across the room. Not fear, resolve. Then the clearing went silent. Too silent. Caleb's instincts flared. He scanned the tree line, and there he was. Marcus Cain moving low, using the outbuildings for cover, inching toward the homestead with murder in his eyes. Caleb raised his rifle, but a gunshot exploded first. Sarah's. Cain staggered, clutching his side, shock etched across his face. He turned toward her window, hatred burning so fierce it swallowed pain. "You'll pay for that," he snarled. Caleb didn't give him the chance. His rifle cracked once more. Cain fell into the snow, still and silent. The valley swallowed the echo. For a long moment, nothing moved. No wind, no sound. Just the two of them standing in a battered, bullet-riddled homestead, breathing hard as the weight of what just happened settled in. Sarah lowered her pistol slowly, hands trembling. We made it," she whispered. Caleb nodded. "Storms passed. All kinds." She sagged onto a chair, overwhelmed, not with grief, but with release. Months of running ended in a single night of defiance. Caleb stepped closer, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now," he said quietly. And for the first time since she'd fled Marcus Cain's grasp, Sarah may believed it. Dawn crept slowly over Hollow Ridge, spilling gold across the snow-covered valley and washing away the darkness of the night before. The storm had passed. The gunfire had stopped. And for the first time in months, Sarah May Hutchkins stood on solid ground. No longer running, no longer hiding, no longer owned by the fear that once defined her. The clearing still held the scars of the battle. Snow churned where horses had trampled it. Splintered wood from the homestead lay scattered like broken bones. Cain's men, battered and defeated, had been forced to retreat under the weight of their own wounded and the loss of their leader. Only Cain himself lay where he fell, silent, unmoving, the valley finally breathing without the shadow of his cruelty. Caleb stood next to Sarah on the porch, arms crossed against the cold morning air. His face was calm, almost too calm, but Sarah could see the fatigue around his eyes. The fight had cost him something. Energy, perhaps, or the last remnants of the solitude he had once clung to. But his posture carried something else too. Purpose. "This place is going to need some fixing," Caleb said, scanning the bullet holes peppered across the wall. Sarah managed a small laugh. "Feels strange seeing in the daylight. Less frightening. More like something that can be rebuilt." Caleb nodded. "Homesteads are like people. They break easy, but they hold together better when someone cares enough to repair them." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. In the soft morning light, He didn't appear as a lone mountain man anymore, shaped only by wilderness and ghosts of the past. He looked like someone standing on the threshold of something new, something he didn't know he needed. "You don't plan on leaving, do you?" she asked. Caleb paused. "Not unless you want me gone." Her answer came without hesitation. "No, I don't." That word, simple, quiet, settled like warm embers in Caleb's chest. They spent the morning dragging broken boards into piles, riding overturned chairs, and clearing snow from the porch. Work came naturally to both of them. Caleb moved with the practiced strength of a man who had built more shelters than most folks ever saw. Sarah, despite the exhaustion gripping her body, worked beside him with steady determination. "You don't have to push yourself," Caleb said at one point, watching her lift a plank nearly as tall as she was. "I'm not pushing," she replied. "I'm reclaiming." He smiled, a rare sight, subtle but genuine. As they worked, the valley seemed to shift around them. Birds returned to the treetops. Sunlight warmed the frost-covered fields. It felt as though the land itself approved of what had taken place, a kind of restoration not just of structures but of souls. By midday, Sarah paused near the garden bed, brushing snow off the withered stalks of long-forgotten plants. "What did your mother grow here?" she asked. "Everything that could survive the mountains," Caleb said. "Potatoes, beans, carrots. Even tried corn once. Wind didn't care for it." Sarah smiled softly. "My mom had a garden too. Small, but she always said food you pull from soil tastes different. Cleaner somehow." "We could plant again," Caleb said without thinking. "Come spring." The suggestion hung between them, not just planting, but the idea of staying, building, growing, not as two strangers thrown together by chance, but as something closer. Partners in survival, partners in rebuilding, maybe even partners in more ways than either dared admit yet. Before Sarah could answer, the crunch of wagon wheels sounded in the distance. She stiffened instantly, hand flying toward the pistol holstered at her hip. Caleb placed a steadying hand on her arm. "Easy. Not all who come are enemies." The wagon rolled into view, driven by old Mrs. Landry, the town's midwife, with two ranch hands trailing behind. They stopped a cautious distance away, studying the bullet-riddled homestead and the pair standing outside it. Caleb stepped forward. "Mornin'," he said. Mrs. Landry nodded. "We heard shooting last night. Ridge carry sound. Folks were worried." Her eyes flicked to Sarah. "Word around town said Marcus Cain was riding out this way. He was," Caleb said flatly. "He won't be coming back." The two ranch hands exchanged glances, understanding exactly what Caleb meant. Mrs. Landry's gaze softened, not with pity, but with respect. "You did what needed doing," she said quietly. "Cain hurt a lot of people. Many won't mourn him." Sarah swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. Mrs. Landry dismounted with surprising grace for her age and approached Sarah directly. "Child," she said gently, "I heard what Cain accused you of, but I've known wicked men my whole life. Cain was as wicked as they come. You didn't do wrong by running." Sarah blinked, stunned by the kindness. "You're welcome in Hollow Ridge," Mrs. Landry said firmly. More welcome than he ever was. Those simple words unraveled something inside Sarah. Acceptance, something she had never expected, flowed through her like warmth from fire. Caleb watched her shoulders loosen, her eyes brighten just slightly. And that was when he finally understood something he'd been resisting. He wasn't meant to face the world alone anymore. After the visitors left, Sarah and Caleb returned to their work. But now there was a new lightness in the air, as if the valley itself approved of the turning tides. That afternoon, they repaired the front door. By evening, they cleared out the broken beams. As the sun dipped behind the pines, Caleb lit the fireplace with a match and stood back. The warm glow filled the room again, soft, alive, hopeful. Sarah stepped closer to him, her hands still smudged with dirt and ash. "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again," she said quietly. "You are," Caleb replied. "And as long as I've got breath in me, you'll stay that way." She held his gaze. In her eyes, relief mixed with something deeper, trust perhaps, gratitude, maybe even the beginnings of affection. Caleb reached beneath his shirt and removed the wooden cross his mother had carved. Years of wear had smoothed its edges. She wanted me to come back to goodness, he said, offering it to Sarah. Funny thing is, I think you're the reason I finally did. Sarah touched the cross gently, tears pooling in her eyes. Then let's make this place good again. For both of us. Caleb nodded. Outside, the last light of day cast golden streaks across the snow. The mountains stood tall and silent, no longer symbols of isolation, but guardians of a homestead reborn. That night, as firelight filled the restored room, two souls who had once been shattered found a place where fear no longer ruled and hope no longer hid. In the years that followed, the valley would tell their story, not as victims, not as fugitives, but as the mountain man and the brave woman who rebuilt a life from ruin and carved their legend into the heart of Hollow Ridge.